welcome to Teacher Therapy. Today we have a very special guest named Steve Burgess, and he is an author, an educator, and a podcaster who has worked with students for over 25 years. And today he's going to talk to us about why he decided to officially leave the classroom in order to support teachers full time. But before we get there, Steve, I would love to just know, what was the first shock or surprise that you experienced once you actually got in the classroom?
I mean, I've experienced students spitting and kicking and hitting. I've been hit. I mean, I was moderating the cafeteria. I was on cafeteria duty. I was covering for a class years ago as a substitute teacher. And I put my hand, I was leading, and my finger accidentally touched, and it was a fifth grade girl. And she went and complained and said that I touched her left chest, her breast.
Wow.
And then I had to stay behind for 2 hours to talk to the principal, who actually said that I was an exemplary teacher in her school. And this was back in the days when I was first starting out. And then the girl obviously told a lie. So the lying is unreal in the schools. They would look at your face and I just saw you did that. And they will say, no, I didn't. So I'm amazed at the lies that they tell. I'm amazed at some of the physical altercations I've seen, the working conditions. But in terms of the behavior, the defiance, they just walk out the classroom, shove me and walk out, and don't even care. I've experienced these things. And I've seen other colleagues go through it, and I had to defend them. And they'll try to fight, and they say, "What are you doing? Get out of my way!" And they'll push me out of the way, and they'll say, "Look, you have to go to the principal's office. You're going to be suspended." So I'm amazed at the amount of power they think that they have when they are defiant. And the teachers seem to be, it's like there's less power, less executive power, if you will, in the classroom that we have. And I know you can relate to this and other teachers you've had on this podcast.
Definitely. It's always interesting to me because I get a lot of commenters that say if there were just males in the classroom, none of these problems would exist. And so I'm kind of curious if you think that it's easier to manage a classroom being a guy or harder.
That's an excellent question. I've been confronted with this time after time after time from family members and friends of mine. And I say yes and no. Yes, that it could work in my advantage in terms of discipline with certain type of students. But then if they're far gone with their behavior, it could have adverse effects, like what I told you about the little girl who I was directing. So it could work both ways. It's not I wouldn't say it's easier overall, because the average teacher, they say, is a 40-year-old female with 2.5 children. So I don't fit that profile. So they look for this. They have this mummy, what I would call a mummy complex. So I don't fit that bill. Sometimes they will say mummy, and they're looking at me, or daddy, and I say thank you, but I'm your teacher right now. But it's nice to be thought of as a parental figure, as a guide for the students. But that's what I found to be most interesting, most intriguing.
That is really interesting. And I'm kind of curious what your experience has been like with parents over these last few decades. Have they been supportive, or how's that been?
Oh, that's a whole nother program there. But to make a long story short, I've had mixed relationships. They always have, like, the top 25% or the top 20%, they're very engaging. They'll give to the school. They always come to the conferences. They'll always participate in the PTO when we had one, and participate in school events. Then you have the middle 50% who don't show up for anything, but they'll still once in a while check in. But they'll always accuse me of not teaching their child or make accusations. And then you have the hardcore bottom 25% who always never show up or never communicate with me. So I've had parents from a wide range. A lot of them are not with the program, unfortunately. But you always have a few who reach out and thank me for teaching their child, shower me with gifts at Christmas time when the students get to give gifts, and even for Teacher Appreciation Week.
And so I'm kind of curious. It's kind of a hot button issue on my channel about, gentle parenting versus permissive parenting versus
Hmm.
authoritative parenting. I'm
Yeah,
curious, in your humble opinion, where do you think parents are missing it and struggling with this modern generation of kids?
excellent question. And even in my book, Guidelines for the Successful Student, I address this question too. But what I found over the years from having parent teacher conferences for 25 years as a classroom teacher, I found that these parents are not really providing structure for their students at home. They don't create a print rich environment at home. They don't create a quiet area to study. I remember back in the days when we were growing up, there was one TV called the Tube in the middle of the living room where everybody got to watch after dinner, not while we were eating, but we were allowed to go and watch TV for about an hour. Then we had to turn the TV off to do our homework at the table. So I don't see any of that. So that's why in my book I talk about providing a structure. There's no sense of communication. Parents are working later, more hours because of the demands of society that we are placed under today, that parents have to work more. So the stress levels are really high. I've seen so many dysfunctional families over the years or even non-nuclear parents where none of the parents exist are non-existent, and someone had to step in, an aunt or grandmother, to take care of the child. The students would come to school not properly dressed, not smelling clean, didn't have any breakfast, or didn't even bring a snack for snack time. And this is a recurring problem with the same students. So I've met the same students so many times with different kids.
Mhm.
So it disturbs me when I see the lack of training with the parents at home and the lack of discipline they allow to hear how some of the students talk to their parents. You'll be appalled, and I know you've seen this, and many people have. And it's embarrassing. It's quite embarrassing where even if I'm trying to have a conference and two of the children are at the side, they start bickering with one another, and the mother is trying to plead with the child, and the child is not listening to them. It's like they don't exist. So the lack of discipline, the lack of structure and training.
Definitely. And
Mm.
I'm curious, what do you think has gone wrong? Do you think that it's more, practical issues like parents aren't home because they're working, or do you think that they have wrong mindsets about how to raise kids?
I'll say a bit of both. I'll say that they have the wrong mindset because they are what I would call the helicopter parent, where they just think just because I'm not at home, they want to make up for it and shower their child with gifts. Or because I'm working so much, I'm so glad to see my child again. I just want to shower them with love and gifts. And they don't have time to really train them, to teach them, to show support in that way. So I think it's because of the demands placed on society and also because of the wrong mindset. The value system has changed. Imagine America's number one core value has been rugged individualism. So that fits the profile of what's going on in our society with our parents. A lot of them is like, you have to get yours after a while. They give up. And then when they try to rescue their kid, it's too late because they hadn't taken the time in the first 7, 8 years of the child's life to train them properly. So they experience problems with them as teenagers, and I've seen this so many times. So, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, I just remember being slightly horrified. I started teaching, I think I was barely 25. And I
Mm,
remember
yeah.
parents that were older than me telling me, I don't know what to do with my kid. What should I
Yeah,
do? And I'm like, I don't have any kids. I don't know how to fix your kid. And so it was really sobering to realize
I can
that,
relate to that.
yeah, they just like, you're so right. They waited too late.
Yeah.
And by the time a kid's even in fourth grade, it is
Mhm.
very difficult to walk back some of
Yeah,
those
it
patterns.
is. It is because it takes at least 30 days to learn a new habit, and then it takes a couple months to undo that habit, 3 months. So it's like, where is the training? And where are the parents? I mean, there could be two parents in the house, and neither of them are really present, if you know what I mean. They could be there, but they might not be there with them. They have to be more proactive with their children.
Definitely. And I'm kind of curious, in my opinion, schools, ceasing discipline has a lot to do with them realizing that parents aren't disciplining and not wanting to upset parents. So I'm
Right.
curious, over the decades, have you seen a decrease in how much teachers are able to give out consequences and hold students accountable?
Big time. I've seen a gross decrease, unfortunately. And teachers have lost their executive powers, I stated earlier. It seems as though it's diminished because of good cause and because of not having a school-wide discipline plan anymore or not enforcing it because it would hurt the child. It's too sensitive for the child. Now you have all these current issues with gender identity, with identity of the child, of their learning styles, and you can't say certain terminology anymore. So there's a lot of sensitivity politically, but also because of the culture of the children, the culture of society today is like you can't say this and you can't say that. You can't harm the child. No child left behind, but they're leaving the children behind
Mm.
because they're not really addressing the root causes of these issues with their lack of reading skills and math skills. So yes, I would say that they are really it's really painful to see that this culture has had a negative impact on um, how much power teachers are given. Principals allow the parents to run the schools. So the schools are being run practically by the parents, especially with private schools, even with public. But private schools, parents are paying for their child's education. So administration allows the parents to have a larger say, even though I don't see evidence of PTOs. You're supposed to have a PTO where you decide what issues need to be addressed. And then you have programs that are taken out for discipline. And in its place, you have love and light. Everything is about love and light now. It's like you have to phrase it like this to the child. You can't say, don't do that, or why are you doing this? You could say, well, what made you decide to do this instead? I mean, we've moved away from the reality of what they should expect in the real world of work. So there's a disconnect.
I 100% agree. And I think a lot of people in the general public
Hmm.
don't realize this yet. And they're still
Hmm.
thinking of how it was when they went to school. Because I got into a little back and forth with a commenter yesterday because they were complaining and saying, oh, you teachers have a victim mentality and you're complaining that your hands are tied behind your back and you're just
Yeah.
embracing disempowerment. And I tried to let them know nicely, you have no idea what you're talking about
Right.
because it's literally true. Like teachers are afraid to correct a kid, even with
Hmm.
the wrong tone of voice. It could
Hmm.
become a huge meeting. They cannot renew your contract. It's just like there is so much fear in the teaching profession, like you said, of just saying the wrong thing or phrasing something in the wrong
Yeah.
way. And
Yeah.
I think kids pick up on that. They can sense the
Yes.
difference between a confident person that has authority versus one that is, kind of bowing down to them and saying, my little princess, my little prince,
Hmm.
just tell me what to do. And so I'm glad that you're bringing this up for sure.
Yeah. And another one example of that is I was teaching students about how to use their token economies for behavior. They'll earn tokens for behaving well for completing assignments. And one day I caught another student lying about stealing one set of tokens from another student. And I was in a private school. And this was like 10, 15 years ago. And when I was correcting it, I might have looked like I was upset. And so I had a ball of paper, right? I balled it up, and there was a waste paper basket by my desk. And I just kind of threw it there, but I looked upset. Do you know that the paraprofessional who's in the room went and complained to the principal that I was getting angry with the kids and showing anger? You would have thought that I threw over desks and chairs or something like that, or shoved the kid. It's because she knew I was angry about the stealing. And I say, no, this is wrong in your religion to steal. So just because I threw that paper in the direction of my paper bag, when I just finished saying that, and I might have thrown it like that, they got upset and they took it like I was harmful to the kids. And then, like you say, being a male, I have that voice, and it came off like I was angry with the kids. And so I say, look, if you don't feel comfortable, I think it's best at the end of the week I'll move on because I did have other vacancies, other opportunities that were coming up. So I decided to move on.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can really relate to that. I had a situation at a private school too where a kid directly lied to my face and
Yeah.
I 100% caught him in it. And so I was honest
Hmm.
with the kid. This was at a Christian private school. And I
Hmm.
said, it's really
Hmm.
disappointing that you're looking me in the eyes and lying. So
Hmm.
his mom came later to the school and said, I can't believe you told him he was lying. I don't even tell my kid that he's lying. That's so unproductive to do it that way. And it just was so shocking to me. This was only 3 years into my teaching career. But as I just kept going, it became more and more extreme. And it's really awful because I think in the real world, students, like you said, they see the real time consequences that when you say
Hmm.
something terrible or you do something bad, it's going to upset people.
Hmm.
And in the school environment, teachers have to have this really fake plastic
Yeah.
persona all the time, and they
Yeah.
have to use this fake voice, and it's like
Hmm.
kids never get an opportunity to feel the weight of their actions, and I think
Right.
that's so dangerous.
That is very, and by the way, that happened, what I said before, in an Islamic school where
Mhm.
they emphasize lying and cheating and stealing. So I was upset and I said it's haram to do that, but they took it like I was really attacking the kids.
It's a
No.
definitely scary the
Yeah.
direction our society is going
Yeah.
because kids are learning that they have no accountability, and then I see
Hmm.
that filtering out into society where
Hmm.
laws are changing, for example, where some cities won't prosecute stealing under $1,000. So people have
Yes.
learned that they can walk in and nobody's allowed to stop them. No security can't even stop them. And it's like our
Right.
culture is just
The
disintegrating
culture.
in the
Yeah.
West. It's terrible.
It's terrible. And the influences of social media and cable television and video age is really infiltrated our students' minds. And while these tools could be used for good, they could also be used for bad as well. And I've seen both ways. I've seen how it's been used for bad. And
Mhm.
mind you, I've had a successful teacher career overall. It's just that there's a lot of struggles that I had to go through to get where I am today out of the classroom.
Definitely. And I'm kind of curious, how have all of these issues impacted students' learning? Because I talk a lot about on this channel how in modern times, teachers can't give a student a zero, they get a 50 even if they don't try
Yeah,
anything, everybody passes. Have you kind
yes,
of seen that happening and how
yes.
it impacted things?
When I first started out 25 years ago in a public middle school, I was teaching honor classes in math, and then I was teaching two general education classes where the general population sat. And mind you, I've had classes of 39 and 43 students in those days. And then one was 35 and the other two was 33. So I had all these middle school students, two sixth grade classes, two seventh grade classes, and one honors eighth grade class. And in the four classes, the ones who I taught that were not honors classes, the sixth grade and one seventh grade, the dean, the head of the because there was a head of year for each grade level. Two of the deans got together and told me, "Well, you're new, so don't give a child a zero. Give them 59 because 59 is technically an F." So I say even if they didn't attempt this up, yes. Even if they didn't turn this up, yes. We don't want to see zeros in your grade book. We want to see 59%.
Wow.
So there were students who end up skating with a C who I thought should not have received a C. And I tell students, I say, by the way, I've never given grades. I've assigned them. We've never given grades to our students. We've assigned grades to students. They have to earn the grades. So to me, what is an A today? What is an F? What is a B? I mean, I've seen in a state where B now is like 60%. It's ridiculous how the standards have dumbed down. So I think there's been a dumbing down of the curriculum and of the standards for students.
Definitely. And that was actually going to be my next question. I know that for some teachers in the early years, they had a lot of freedom and flexibility
Yeah,
about how to teach and instructional
yeah.
strategies. And now it's micromanaged. Have you seen that too?
I've seen so much of that micromanaging. I mean, they'll literally tell me, well, you got to say it this way. I've had so many observations, and I don't mind because I always invite the principal because I always passionate about teaching, and I have my lively style, my exciting style of teaching, hands on, and also because I'm not a typical textbook teacher where okay, turn to page 41. Let's do odd numbers from 1 to 15. No, I'll have them hands on. I'll ask thought provoking questions. They might watch a little slide or little presentation. I'll have them present, work in groups. But yes, I've seen a lot of micromanaging, not only from administration, particularly principals, but even from colleagues who've been given an academic teacher leader position.
Mm.
They'll watch over my shoulder and say, "Oh no, don't do it like that. Do it like this." So that kind of gaslights me and makes me feel like, what am I doing here? Am I doing this right? Don't what was the academic freedom that we once used to enjoy as teachers, as educators? It's like it's diminished.
Definitely. And I'm
Mm.
curious, have you felt the joy for teaching diminished over the years because of the changes in education?
That's an excellent question. I would say yes. I Now my passion, if I could differentiate from joy and passion, my passion for teaching has never wavered. Even now, I teach online. I do tutoring online. My passion is still elevated, but my joy for the working conditions that it's subjected to has diminished. The joy for teaching, because of the politics and the working conditions and the demands on society and the lack of respect for teachers and education system, the way how things are being done is deterred me from continuing to want to stay in the classroom. So yes, that's changed a lot.
Definitely. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what your experience has been like with people like administrators or instructional coaches. Did you find that they were supporting you or hindering you in your career?
There are times when they've been very supportive and I've received excellent evaluations. But then there are times when they'll nitpick, like the first principal who was supposed to be my first principal, potentially, she never hired me because she said, oh, there were a couple kids out of place, there were a couple kids talking when I was observing you. You will never make it in this state. You will never, and this was 25 years ago when I was going to start out. So what a wake up call that was. But what I think a lot of administrators confuse is behavior management from classroom management. She
Mm.
used the word classroom management. My classroom management is great. I know how to set up a classroom, set up small groups, teach whole group, and do pair and share and concepts like that. And I know how to use the room for different centers and so on. But the behavior management, because they might see two or three out of line, and like in another school I was at, I was supposed to teach French from K through 6. And then she switched me to this first grade classroom that had a lot of behavior problems. They were throwing crayons everywhere, pencils on the ground, and I had to take over that classroom in the middle of the year. So when she came to observe me like 2 days later, she started to write me up for not because there were a couple kids out of place, like talking or slouching in their chair. So sometimes they have not been very supportive because sometimes even some of the administrators have never been classroom teachers themselves. I've had principals who never served a day in the classroom as a teacher, and I don't know how they got into the BD administration. But I know from out of field, there is a way that they could merge into and become an administrator.
Wow. And I'm kind of curious, over your 25 plus years of being in education, we may have touched on it already, but what are some of the ways that you feel like education has gone wrong and gotten off track?
I would say the curriculum. The
Mhm.
curriculum has gotten off track. It's like the standardized tests. There's a lot of either teaching to the standardized tests, and to me, there's too much testing. And then when they remove some of the special subjects like art and music, and even diminished PE in a lot of schools, it takes away from the students' creativity and learning. So, what I've done is I've infused all of these things into my subjects. I will have rhythm and rhyme in reading, or I have them make a triangle by doing PE. They'll stand up in triangles and squares. And I'll say, what shape is this? How could we change into a square? Why is this a square right now? And then we'll play hopscotch or whatever after that at recess time. So the students are the ones who, unfortunately, are at the wrong end of the stick. So curriculum has changed, the behavior issues have changed. There's no discipline plan in many schools now. It's like love and light, love and logic, they call it, where they just, well, you got to find a philosophical way to relate to the child instead of punishing them. Think of what more rewards. I mean, there's so many rewards that they're already receiving. But I learned when I was growing up, and even we are rewarded for our hard work, but there's consequences, like you were mentioning, for wrongful behavior. And I say consequences can be positive or negative. So there's negative consequences when you do wrong and positive when you do right. So the discipline, the curriculum, the culture has had a tremendous impact of our students. The lack of respect from student to teachers, from student to parents, the lack of support, lack of not only administrative support, but support staff. There's no behavior specialist in a lot of schools now, as you may have heard and witnessed. When there's kids who are supposed to be on an IEP, who's supposed to be autistic. I've had severe autistic students in my class. And then there's this young lady who showed up in tore up jeans trying to do her college work on her laptop. This is a couple years ago. And this young girl screaming loud. And all she does is give her lollipops to pacify her because she was autistic. So there's no support staff or very little, and taking out specials, and then just more cyberbullying because of the culture. And there's no consequences given, very few consequences. You hardly ever hear about suspensions now. They always try to keep them in the classroom. You got to keep that child in your classroom, Mr. Burgess. Can't suspend the kid. I say, I'm not trying to suspend it, I just want them to get support. And I have to be the one who has to be the mediator. And you don't mind as a teacher helping out with mediation conflict resolution. But there are times where they might need the extra support. And I have all these other students to teach. So there's no time, not enough time in the day to do all the things that I need to get to. So there's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot more paperwork too. We're doing the the administrator's secretary's job. We're doing the vice. There's no assistant principal, so we are doing all the attendance and we're doing the record keeping as well. We're doing everything.
Yeah. And when you were talking about rewards, the interesting thing is we even got to the point in some of the schools that I was teaching at where we couldn't even withhold rewards anymore and it went to
Right.
everyone. And it would be
Yeah.
crazy because we would start off the year, the team of teachers saying things
Hmm.
like, okay, we're going to have special parties just for people
Hmm.
that meet the
Right.
standards. We're going to hold back kids from field trips that act crazy.
Hmm.
And in one school, it was a low income school. So we had donors literally pull together money
Hmm.
for a special ski trip
Right.
for the kids that were doing the right thing. And
Hmm.
we had this as our behavior,
Hmm.
promise and management plan all year saying, well, do you want to go skiing? It's going to be
Right.
amazing. And a few weeks before the ski trip, the principal basically says, you know what, you can't hold anybody back for
Yeah.
any reason. And it was just so crazy to me. It's like
Yes.
we basically lied to the kids then
Right.
and said that their behavior mattered because apparently, the
Hmm.
kid that throws desk and rips apart bulletin
Right.
boards gets rewarded the same as the straight A student that is respectful. So it really is crazy.
And it's part of their overall inclusion model, if it were,
Mhm.
because they want to include everyone. They don't want anyone to feel left out. But to me, that takes away from the value of good behavior and consequences. There needs to be consequences. It's one thing if they make a mistake and they apologize for it and they make amends. It's another when they keep repeating the same offense and getting away with it and still be allowed to go on the field trip. I've experienced this too. And
Mhm.
two of the students got lost at Disney World, and tears rolled down my eyes because I spent an hour trying to find these two kids.
Wow.
And when I found them, they were lining up to go on the Incredible Hulk ride, stuffed, their faces stuffed with popcorn and ice cream. So cases like that, those two boys should not have been allowed to go on the field trip in the first place. And I was begging the parents and the administration not to allow them because of their unruly behavior, but they still were allowed to go.
Yeah, and that just kind of reminds me of what's going on with parenting because many of the times when the admin changed the rules, it was because
Yeah.
a parent complained. And I'm not a parenting expert, but what I've always heard is you want the consequences to basically be small enough where it doesn't
Yes.
destroy their life when they're young, so that when they
Yes.
get old and the consequences matter so much more, it doesn't destroy their life then. And so it's like little things like losing a field trip, it feels like the end of the world to that kid, but then they learn something so that they're not in jail one day, so that they're not on the news one day. And it's just somehow
Yeah.
there's just this kind of like therapeutic, feel good, fake culture where kids have to be happy 100% of the time. And if they're
Yes.
not happy, then the teacher is the bad guy. And it's
Right.
just so crazy.
And that's why I tell my students in the classroom, it's okay to feel distraught for a minute. It's okay. I used to have a cool off table on the side in the back of the room. I say you can sit and cool off over there. Even if they were mad with me, I said that is fine. We all disagree from time to time. The point is you regroup. And I used to have reflection forms that they fill in to reflect on the misbehavior. So this is some of my consequences that I had. But then you have students who keep repeating the same offense, and if they think you're being too harsh with the class, why are you making them right? They're supposed to have recess. So recess is another topic right there. They're not allowed to be seen sitting out for even a few minutes from recess. So where are all these consequences that we used to have that we could have used and that used to help?
Mhm.
It used to help students to behave better because they knew that the punishment fits the crime and the punishment should fit the crime. And even in my book, I talk about, I came up with a rubric for the kind of rewards that they should get for doing what and what consequences they could receive. The punishment should fit the crime, it should never be excessive. But at the same time, students need to know that, hey, when I do the right thing, there's good consequences. And when I do something wrong or bad or unacceptable, there's negative consequences.
I 100% agree, 100%. So I'm kind of curious, what do you wish the public, non-teachers knew and understood about what a teacher's job is like now?
Excellent question. The first thing I want to know is that you have to be in it for the passion, not for the money. They do not pay us enough. They could not pay you enough for what you're about to get into. Make sure that this is a calling, even from God Almighty. Make sure this is a calling. This is a calling for and the passion that you have. So that's the first thing. Make sure you love working with children. Second thing is, I would advise any beginning teachers, anyone who's thinking about teaching, to practice with substitute teaching. I've hardly ever heard anyone say this. You'd be surprised at how much experience you pick up from being a substitute teacher, because then you'll be able to train yourself and see what works and what doesn't work for you. Even though you're not responsible for the grading and the conferences and meeting with parents, but you'll get a feel for your behavior management skills and your classroom management skills day to day as a sub. So start because they don't teach you behavior management in college.
Mhm.
And then third of all, be prepared for the unexpected. Be prepared for the unexpected. I've met classrooms that were tossed to and fro, or kids throwing gum or crayons, and I had to put a stop to that. So make sure you reteach. Come up with a discipline plan for your classroom because sometimes you might be on your own, but once you prepare and plan well, good could come out of it. You could be successful. But make sure you know establish rapport with your administrators, with your colleagues. Make sure you know what is expected. Learn the school culture because
Mhm.
every school has their own unique culture. So learn what is expected in that school and how other teachers relate, how other students relate to the other teachers. And be prepared to not have too much of a life. It's a lot of work.
Definitely. So I'm curious, what factors finally made you decide to go ahead and leave the classroom?
And that's a great question. And there are quite a few factors. One is the changing landscape of how discipline is being exerted or used in the school or not. There's no discipline plan. So this is why we have a lot of these shootings in the schools. Schools are not safe anymore, not as safe as they used to be. There's the no discipline. So it's love and logic. And then you have the teacher does not have any, if any, executive power. There's no academic freedom. You can't teach what you want to teach the way that's best for you to teach it anymore. You got to teach and test all the time. And these high stakes tests are getting more and more out of control. And then there's no consequences for negative behavior. And I always struggled with that the extent to which I could not execute those consequences. I could not execute, like recess time, not having recess time. And then the culture has infused them. They come to school ill prepared. They're not motivated to learn because the parents are not training them. The parents want to fight with the teachers. And I've had experience, even a grandfather trying to threaten me because I told him that his grandson is not following directions, he's not focused. And just because he came marching right in. So there's lack of policy procedures in the school. And then what I've experienced too is the change of even procedures of how students learn, especially in elementary school. They want to institute the middle school, high school model in many schools now, where they have blocks and the students have to keep leaving the classroom and you have different groups of students coming in. I don't agree with that for elementary. I believe in the nurturing of the young child, that they should see the teacher, the main teacher most of the day, and then for specials go to different specials. There's a situation now where students have to go in and out, and then with no discipline plan, is going to cause more movement, more chaos with the students. And then of course the parents are not involved. There's lack of PTO, PTA organizations now. So the parents are not even as are clueless now about what's going on with their children. So all these are issues that made me want to leave. Of course, lack of pay, lack of benefits or incentives to keep the teachers. And like I've always told my friends, it might they might incentivize people to start, but they don't do a great job. Like I said in my last podcast that I made, they don't do well to keep the teachers in the profession. So
Yeah.
there's no incentives. There's very lack of incentives, lack of growth, lack of promotional opportunities for teachers to want to stay. And after being in the profession as long as I have, I should be the, the leader, even the principal, or even the academic leader, the head of department. I've done it a couple times, but then they took it back because the person decided to come back. So these are the reasons why I left. And I say, and then the day to day wear and tear, getting up 5 o'clock in the morning, and then you have to face these problems, and then the kids keep getting sick and they don't sanitize, and you have to keep. And I used to keep catching colds, and I wonder where it came from. Even used to get styes, and I
Mhm.
never used to get sty. And then this girl in the class used to always have a sty, and then I end up getting it. because you're in close contact. And the COVID period was a very difficult period where we had to transition from the classroom to virtual. But then I got used to the virtual through all those experiences. So now I do virtual teaching.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me to my next question. Are you happier now that you're out of the traditional classroom and doing your different things? Can you tell us about it more?
Yes, I can. I am very happy to announce that as of September this in 2024, I began my online teaching and my business, Mr. B the Teacher LLC, in which I signed up with two tutoring platforms, Varsity Tutors and Tutor.com, as part of my business strategy, and whereby I've amassed so many clients. I have over 25 clients now that I'm tutoring from day to day. And what I like about it is I'm teaching one on one as opposed to having a large mass of students. I could zero in, come up with learning plans for each class, for each student, lesson plans for each one, and I could zero in on those concepts. And I've seen a lot of changes already in the 3 months, the 3, 4 months I've been doing this. And I must say, and besides that, I have more time to write books, which I have an award-winning book. Um, Guidelines for the Successful. It just won the International Impact Book Award. So it's available now on Amazon. This is my copy. And then I write educational songs for students as well. So it frees up a lot of time for me to do different things to help struggling students rather than just being confined to the one classroom all day long with so many distractions and interruptions, so much breathing down my neck. And then you're limited as to how you could teach. Now I could be more innovative and more creative. So I actually am happier doing it.
That's wonderful. I'm always so glad to hear teachers and educators that are passionate and can switch to something else that's
Yeah.
more life-giving and sustainable and
Yes.
peaceful. That is wonderful. And I'm curious, what is your website? How can people get connected with you?
Well, the main website is mrbetheteacher.com.
Awesome.
mrbetheteacher.com is my website, and on that website, they could actually look for a copy of my and order a copy of my guidelines for the successful student book, which took me 2 years to write over the COVID period. It just won the International Impact Book Award. But on there, they could sign up for my tutoring services through Varsity and Tutor.com platforms, where I've partnered with them, and through those platforms they could partner with me to receive tutoring services from me in all major subject areas. And then of course they could check out my Mr. B Beats for Brains, where I have my educational music songs that I actually write songs myself and compose my own poetry and songs.
Well, that's amazing. Thank you so much, Steve. And
No
there's one
problem.
question I almost forgot to ask you. If you could wave a magic wand and change anything in education, what would you change?
I would change the way that they to raise the pay for teachers. Number one, there should be more incentives for educators. They should be paying us at the rate higher, mostly higher than all the other professions, because the teaching profession is the profession that makes all other professions possible, as you know. So yes, the pay needs to increase, the incentives need to be there, the discipline needs to be reinstituted. There should be consequences and less standardized testing and more criterion based testing, whereby you actually teach them and they actually get tested in the standards that measures what you wanted to measure and measure what they actually were taught rather than some biased testing on issues that they've never covered in the curriculum. So I would like to change those things if I wave a magic wand.
Well, awesome, Steve. Thank you so much for interviewing with us. I think a lot of teachers are going to relate to your story and feel encouraged by the
Thank
career
you.
path you've taken. And, audience, thank you so much for watching. If you haven't already,
Thank
make sure
you.
to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to interview with me, you can email me at teachertherapytrish@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you guys next time. Bye, everyone.